This week I have for you an eerie and atmospheric story sent to me by a viewer named No Crust Please, called We Found the Thing That Killed a Kid in the Woods. At a water tower turned local hotspot, 4 friends theorize about what happened to the kid that died there. But they soon discover the truth firsthand, the truth that lurks in the woods below. When you see something pursuing you in the woods, and it's faster than you are, just keep going, and pray that it's not as hungry as it is fast. This happened the summer I was 13, in a little town in Indiana. We had maybe 4,000 people there, one of those Midwest places with a grain elevator and a ton of churches. And it also had this water tower out past the edge of town. You could see it from almost anywhere. The town's name was painted on the side in letters, which have by now completely faded away. But that tower is the reason I'm telling you a story today. My friends and I used to climb that tower at night. This was the late 80s. Back then, a kid could vanish out of his own house after dark, as long as he had a story, and we let our parents know when we'd be back. And we always had a story. You told your folks you were staying over at someone's house, and that somebody told his folks he was staying at yours. And as long as the 2 sets of parents never got on the phone with each other, you had the whole night to yourself. We spent a lot of those nights at the tower. There were 4 of us that ran together that summer. Cooch was the loud guy. Brian was almost as loud and never shut up. He always had a story to tell, and his older brother was constantly the one feeding him those stories. Denny was a quiet guy and went along with whatever. You could never tell if he was into something or completely against it, because he just wouldn't say. Then there was me, who mostly remembers being the one paying attention while the other 3 carried the night. We'd been friends since grade school. In a town that size, there are only so many kids your age, and you don't get to pick, so you take the ones you've got. The tower we quote-unquote found the summer before. I don't remember the specifics, but one of us got dared to climb it. Definitely wasn't me, but after that it became ours. By that I mean our friend group's tower. Getting up the tower was the easy part. A ladder ran up one of the legs with the safety cage long gone, and a catwalk wrapped the whole way around the tank up top. From the catwalk, you could see the entire town laid out below. The streetlights, a lit sign at the marathon station, and the dark squares of bean fields. We'd haul up a couple of sleeping bags and a cooler, and we'd sit there with our backs against the cool steel of the tank, staying up most of the night. It was higher than it sounds. The whole structure had a little give to it in the wind, a slow sway you stopped noticing eventually, and the tank would tick and groan now and then. Someone told me once it was the steel cooling. But it spooked me the first few times I heard it, but then it turned into part of the place's charm. Being up there, you felt like you were getting away with something cool, just by sitting up there, 100 feet over a town that thought you were asleep in bed. The cooler was Cooch's job. His uncle kept a second refrigerator in his garage, and he kept nothing in it but beer, cans stacked on cans, and his uncle put away enough of it that he never noticed a few going missing. Cooch would lift a 6-pack at a time, never getting caught. So there we'd be, the 4 of us, 13 and 14 years old, passing around warm beer we didn't even like yet, telling stories. But the stories were the real reason we climbed up there. There was a story we always came back around to. That one was true, or true enough that it had been in the papers. 3 summers ago, back then I mean, a kid named Aaron Pruitt had been found dead up on this very catwalk. He was 16, a couple of grades ahead of us. We'd all known who he was. You know, small town and all that. A man walking his dog along the old road here had seen something he thought was a body, so he called it in. And he was right. When the fire department went up, Aaron was lying on the catwalk, and he had been dead a day or 2. It was tragic, sure, but what got everybody, though, was the way he was found. He had died of thirst. Dehydration, the official word was. A healthy 16-year-old boy found dead of thirst on top of the town's entire water supply. 1,000,000 gallons of it, sitting right there under him behind a 1/4 inch of steel. The coroner's explanation was that Aaron had been on some kind of drug that ran his body dry, then put him out before he could do anything about it. You can't desperately drink some water when you're passed out. That was the story that made the paper, and the story the school sent a letter home about. The letter left a certain part out, though, as the trouble with that story was that there were no drugs found in Aaron. None. We got it from Denny's mom, who worked at that clinic, and once you've heard a thing like that, you don't forget it. I remember a little bit about Aaron. Not much. He bagged groceries at the IGA and had a loud car he was proud of. Once he chased a bunch of us off the tower property back when he was the big kid and we were the little ones. Which is a funny thing to think about now. After he died, the town did about what you'd expect. There was a funeral the whole high school went to, and for a few weeks the sheriff parked a car out by that road by the water tower, so kids would stay away. But eventually he had to stop. He couldn't just stay there every night. The grown-ups of the town settled on the drug explanation, and everything went back to normal. Nobody thought deeper of it. I tried to after hearing about the drug thing, because the first thought I had of a healthy boy dying of thirst on a water tower, well, that made me think he was stuck. And why would a boy be stuck up there and rather die than climb down? But anyway, they put that idea to bed because the grown-ups didn't want to think about that. It was the kids, us, who wouldn't let the story and the theories die. We were just around 13, and as the trauma left us, as time usually helps with, it was obvious that Aaron's demise was a very good ghost story and a bit of a conspiracy. So yeah, legends started up. Some kids figured Aaron had gone up to meet a girl who never showed up, and he lost his mind out there alone, maybe from the heartbreak. Others said somebody had dared him, and for some reason or another he couldn't get back down. The younger kids decided the tower was cursed, and the water was evil, and that if you ever drank out of the tank directly, you would end up like Aaron. The version the 4 of us liked the most, which we retold constantly up there at 2 a.m. with a warm can going around, was that there had been something on the tower with him. We said it had kept him up there, and every time Aaron tried to climb down, it set him back on the catwalk, and it stayed with him the whole time. And that was how a strong kid died of thirst right next to 1,000,000 gallons of water, and never got back down a ladder he had climbed up. We'd been at this a couple of summers by the night I'm telling you about. We'd worn that story clean out. Somebody would do the part about it setting Aaron back on the catwalk in a spooky voice, and somebody else would throw a bottle cap at him, and we'd all laugh. The tower was just our place. It was creepy to us in a good way. That was the whole point of going. Nothing real ever happened up there. Nothing real ever happened in that town at all, except for Aaron. We didn't think anything could happen. The tower stood about 1.5 miles out, on the far side of a piece of woods everybody called the tract. Nobody farmed it, and nobody built on it. You rode the dirt road out past the last few houses, dropped your bike in the tall weeds where a fence line came down to meet the road, and you walked in along a forest path. It was around a 10-minute walk back to the clearing where the tower stood. By day, the tract was nothing special, your typical local woods. But the trees grew very close together, so the canopy completely blotted out the sky when you were in there. Even at noon, it felt like the sun was setting. At night, and with no moon especially, it was as dark as space itself. We always went in before dark and came out in the morning, so I had never once walked that path in the middle of the night. The night I'm telling you about was the back end of July, and it was hot. The sun went down and the heat just stayed. We'd all given our folks the usual. I told mine I was staying over at Cooch's. Cooch had told his mom he was staying at my place. We'd covered for each other like that all summer, and it always worked before. We met at the fence line a little after 9, hiding our bikes in the weeds. Then we walked in while there was still enough light to find the path. We were up on that catwalk with the cooler before it went full dark. It was a good night at the start. We had 2 six-packs and a bag of chips, and a little transistor radio Brian had brought along that only pulled in one station clear, a country station out of the city that not one of us would admit to liking. But just between me and you, I loved it. We sat up there, watching the lights come on across town, giving each other a hard time and getting started on that beer. Cooch could already drink more than the rest of us and wanted us to know it. Denny went quiet and a little green after 2, but he acted like he was just fine. It was just about the most typical version of a night out there. We talked about varsity and girls, mainly who's out of whose league. We debated about whether Cooch could actually take Brian in a fight, which we never settled that one. Brian had a deck of cards and we played a few hands of something, then quit, because nobody could agree on the rules in the dark. The radio drifted in and out. A train went through town way off and we listened to it the whole way across, the horn fading down the line. Then it was quiet, except for us. Once it was completely dark, we got into the stories. Brian started us off. He did the one about the hitchhiker with the hook, and Cooch followed it with the one he swore had happened to his own cousin. Then, inevitably, someone brought up Aaron. We were sitting around on a dead kid's grave, more or less, and that was the appeal of it. That night, Brian had something new to add. He said his older brother had told him that when they brought Aaron's body down, his fingers were all torn up, the fingernails especially, like he had been clawing at something. And the thing he'd been clawing at, Brian said, was the steel of the tank, because at the very end, Aaron had been trying to dig his way through to the water. Brian said if you knew where to look, you could still see the scratches up near the top of the tank. "You're so full of it," Cooch said. "Ask my brother," Brian said. "Your brother's full of it too." Nobody said anything for a few seconds after that. The detail in that story was just a little too good, so it stuck with us. Then Danny said he was going to be sick, and went over to do the sick off the far rail of the catwalk. We laughed at him. Brian turned up the radio then. The station was playing something slow and we all groaned about it. Things felt ordinary again. I remember being happy, dumb, complete. It was some time past midnight when the headlights came. We saw them before we heard anything. 2 beams swinging in off the country road and stopping right where the fence line met it, right where we'd left the bikes. A truck. It sat there with the lights on, aimed into the trees. All 4 of us stopped talking and watched. For a second, I think every one of us landed on the same word. Cops. And Cooch started to say that we should hide the cooler. But then we heard the horn honk. 2 short honks and then a long one. And I knew whose it was before my brain had caught up. My dad honked exactly like that, pulling into our own driveway. 2 short honks and a long one every single time. My stomach did a knot. Then his voice came up out of the dark, all the way across the tract. There was no mistaking it. He yelled my name once. He only ever said it that way when I was in big trouble, and we both knew it. The other 3 looked over at me. Nobody was laughing now. There was nothing I could do but go. If I made him come in there after me, it would be 10 times worse, and the other guys knew that as well as I did. Cooch said good luck and didn't mean it as a joke for once. I grabbed a flashlight from up on the catwalk before starting down. We had 2 of the things. One was a little plastic one that took a square 9-volt. It was basically a little pinprick of nothing light. The other was a big silver mag light that Brian's dad used for hunting. Heavy as a club, 4D batteries in it, and Brian had only brought it along that night by luck. I took the big one, leaving the little one behind. I went down the ladder and no one said a word. The climb down took a while, what with the flashlight in one hand and my dad's voice still hanging in the air over the woods. I was nervous. Soon I was at the bottom, standing in the trees at the head of the path. The path looked different from down there at night. In the daytime, you didn't even think about it being a path. Just a nice gap where people walked. Now it was a narrow, dark tunnel running back under the trees, and the maglite only reached so far into it before the dark closed in around it. I stood there a second longer than I needed to. Then my dad's voice came across the woods again. My name sharper this time. So I went in. The path was easy enough at first. The mag light put out a strong white circle. I kept it on the dirt a few feet ahead of me and walked briskly. The summer woods there at night are loud, all bugs and frogs and little things shifting around in the brush. With all of that going on, it was almost a comfort. The noise meant everything was normal, even if I was in big trouble. My head was full of my dad and what I was about to walk into out of that road, and how long I was going to be grounded for. I wasn't even thinking about Aaron Pruitt. The stories of that boy were the last thing on my mind. I'd made it halfway there when all the bugs stopped. It didn't happen all at once. It was like the noise went quiet in front of me as I walked. A pocket of quiet that moved when I moved, so that I kept walking into silence, pulling it along with me. You notice a thing like that a beat too late, after it's already happened, or after it's already gone. I stopped then, and that quiet stopped with me. Underneath it, I could hear the woods around me like normal, except in my little pocket of silence. I lifted the light up off the path and swung it out into the trees. That was a mistake. The second the beam moved, everything it wasn't pointed at went pure black. The trunks jumped and slid around in the light like they were moving, even though I knew they weren't. I put the beam back down on the path and moved a little faster. That was when I saw it for the first time, out at the edge of the light, right before the white light went to black. Something tall stepped from behind one tree to hide behind another. It was quick and smooth. It was gone before I could get the light onto it. I stopped again, aiming the mag light back where it had gone, but I didn't see anything there. Only trunks and the path. I stood with my heart beating hard, and I stared at the spot I saw it. A deer, I thought. There were deer all over the tract. I'd spooked one, and it bolted. That's what happened. But wouldn't a deer make noise? A deer crashing off through brush in the dark is about the loudest thing in those woods. Branches snapping and hooves coming down. This had not made a sound, and a deer is low to the ground. The shape I'd seen go between those two trees had been upright, and it had been tall, taller than my own dad, and my dad was a big man. I stood there, frozen for a moment, before realizing I needed to keep walking. Standing still in the dark was a horrible idea. So I walked fast. The path was a pale line out ahead in the maglight, and I followed it, trying to keep my eyes straight forward. But that's not something you can just do. Not when you know something is back there. You have to look. Every few steps I would swing that light around, and I would catch the trees standing still. Then I'd face forward and walk. A few steps later I'd feel it again, that sense of something out there keeping pace with me, off to the side, matching me step for step. Every time I turned the light, it was gone. Or maybe it was already standing still and I just couldn't see it. But that pocket of quiet moved with me the whole way, and I knew it in my body. I was not walking through those woods alone. The path split once. I recognized that. You went right to get to the road, so I went right. I'd gone a little ways when I realized the path I was on was getting narrower than it should have been, and the ground had begun to slope down. There was no slope between the split and the road. I'd taken a wrong turn somehow, except there had only been the one split, and I'd gone right at it, the same as I'd gone right at it 100 times before. I stopped and turned around to head back to the split, and there stood that shape, right on the path with me. It was standing in the middle of the path, back where the light barely reached, a tall, straight shape with the trees behind it. It wasn't moving. It didn't have any shine in its eyes the way an animal's might. It didn't have anything I could make out for a face at all. It just stood there in the path between me and the split, and I stood there looking at it. Neither of us moved. and the only sound I could hear in that moment was my breathing coming too hard and too fast. I'm not sure how to describe being looked at by something with no eyes that I could find, but I am certain it was looking at me. I couldn't go forward. That's where it was. So I went off the path, into the trees, away from that shape, crashing through the brush with the mag light swinging all over. I had no idea where I was going. I'd gone a few hundred feet, breathing like a mad cow, when I came around the side of a big trunk, and it was there, in front of me now, the same tall shape, between two trees, so fast and yet somehow it had been waiting. I backed off and went a third way, and after a minute, the ground felt familiar again. Then I saw why. I was passing the same downed tree I'd already climbed over, a big rotted trunk with the roots torn up in a fan. I'd come around in a circle. I hadn't turned myself around. I'd kept going what I thought was straight, and the woods had bent me back to the same dead tree. I stood next to it with the flashlight shaking, and I still had no idea where I was, despite being where I'd walked 100 times during the day, only 10 minutes away from a country road. Somewhere off behind me, the horn went again. Unmistakably my dad. That was just enough time for me to get a fix on where he was. Off to my left, not too far. I turned and went that way. That shape let me go a little ways. Suddenly it was off to my side again, pacing me. A tall nothing shape, slipping from tree to tree without making a single sound. What did it want? Was it chasing me? It was obviously much faster. If it was chasing me down, it would have already caught me. I think I was crying by then. I was gripping that maglite like a lifeline, and I was just moving, any direction now that the shape was not at. But sooner or later, every direction had the shape. I'm not sure how long this went on. It felt like an hour. What ended it were the lights. My dad's headlights, off through the trees to my right. I had been working my way back toward the road the whole time, and I didn't even know it. Was I allowed to make it out? No, I felt more like I was herded here. But I ran at that light, and I didn't look behind me this time, nor to the sides. I ran straight at the headlights, no matter what might be in the way. I broke through the trees, and I stumbled out onto the gravel ditch by the country road so hard I went down on my hands and knees, and the shape did not come out of those trees after me. My dad was standing at the open door of the truck, with the engine running and the lights on. When I came scrambling up out of that ditch, he really dug into me before I was even up on my feet. Where in the hell had I been? Did I have the first idea what time it was? So what happened was, Cooch's mother had called the house at 11, wanting to talk to Cooch, and my mother had told her Cooch wasn't here, and the two of them had the whole thing figured out before they'd even hung up the phone. He was loud and furious, and I had never in my life been so glad to have somebody yelling at me. I got in the truck. My hands were still shaking, and I had gravel ground into both palms and grass and dirt all down the front of me, but my dad was too worked up to notice any of it, and that was fine by me. If he actually noticed that, he would have demanded an explanation, and there was nothing I could have explained right then that he would have believed. We drove home, and he yelled for a while, then went quiet. I sat there looking out the window at the dark country going by, keeping my mouth shut. I didn't tell him about the woods. I thought about it, the whole drive home in fact. I didn't know if I should say a word or not. Eventually I decided if I did say a word, he would probably just take it for an excuse of my situation, or accuse me of being on drugs. So I kept it to myself. What this experience did to me that summer was it took my woods away. Not just the tower, but all the tract. I'd grown up in and around those trees, the tract, the creek, and the fields behind them, like every kid in town. After that night, I couldn't make myself walk into the woods at dusk. Any woods, anywhere. I'd get up to the tree line and my feet would just stop. My mom decided I was getting too old for running around outside, which I didn't know was a thing, but I let her think that. I didn't go back to the tower for the rest of the summer. The other 3 kept at it, and they gave me heck over it, but I took it. Cooch decided I was scared of my dad, and I let him think that. It was easier than telling people the truth, which I wasn't ready to do. School started. They went to the tower less and less, and for a while the whole night just sat in the back of my head as one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. I figured I'd gotten lucky out there in the dark. I was able to make it out alive, with a story that I might be able to eventually tell. The next summer is when I found out how wrong I'd been. I went back the next summer. Nobody made me go. I had every reason on God's earth to stay away from that tower and the tract, and yet I found myself walking back to it on my own 2 feet. What happened in those woods the summer before had not gotten any smaller or lighter in my head. But time and memory did its thing, where it felt farther away, harder to hold on to. With experiences like that, they're the most real thing that's ever happened to you in the moment. But then a year of regular life goes by. Homework, sleepovers, ball games, girls. That kind of stuff just chips away at bad memories, and it gaslights you into believing that things are normal like they used to be. By the next June, I had talked myself most of the way around to the idea that I had scared myself stupid in the dark, that I saw a deer, maybe some hobo or something, and I ran like a baby. I'd finally opened up to the guys about that story. Cooch had been telling everybody the hobo scared me silly version all year, and really I think that helped me to lie to myself about the experience. Being the kid who got scared is a hard thing to be at that age. It followed me around all year. It came up when teams got picked, and when somebody told a ghost story at a sleepover, they always looked over to me to see if I would flinch. To me, I had done the bravest thing I'd ever done, walking out of those woods alive, and as far as anybody knew, I'd run crying from a creepy hobo. By the time that hot summer came around, I think I wanted to go back, if not to just prove to everyone that something is out there, or to prove that I was not too scared to go back. At the time, I wasn't sure which one it was. Both of those things were stupid ideas. Why would I want to see that thing again? Or give it a chance to see me again? Stupid ideas like that, it's what gets kids killed. Not to mention it was a hard summer to stay inside for. It was pretty hot that year. Even the old men were complaining about it. A real drought, they said. The worst anybody could remember since blah. There was no rain to speak of from the middle of May onward. The corn out past town came up, then just quit. It started curling in on itself, the leaves going pale green, then rolling up tight like cigars. The creek where we swam all the time dropped down to a string of warm puddles with the minnows dying in them. They put the town on water rationing in July. No sprinklers and no washing cars. There was a joke going around, too, that we had all better hope the town didn't run dry. Everybody was short-tempered and sticky, looking for something to do after dark. The other thing going on that summer were the dogs. Somewhere that spring, a few farm dogs had gotten loose. They'd gotten in among a bunch of strays, turning into a pack. About 8 or 10 of them, running together out at the edge of town. They were getting into people's garbage. They got into a farmer's chickens one night, killing most of them. And a kid 2 grades under me named Petey got bit on the leg, bad enough that he had to have stitches. He had come around a corner on his bike right into the middle of this pack. After that, everybody had an opinion about the dogs. The sheriff said he would deal with it, and never did. And the thing all the parents told us, mine included, was that if the pack ever cornered you, you did not run. Running is the worst thing you can do with dogs, apparently. You threw them whatever food you had on you and you backed off slow and let them have at it. My dad must have told me that 5 times that summer. I'm glad now that he did. So that's the way that summer was. Hot and cruel. And everyone was bored and miserable. One evening near the end of July, Cooch and Brian came by on their bikes. They said they were riding out to the tower, and I was coming along. But before I could say anything, they added, Or are you too scared of the dark still?" Denny was already in. I stood there in my own driveway, remembering that whole year of being the kid who was a chicken, and I said I was coming along. It was the easiest thing in the world to say, but I think it's the one decision I wish I could take back, even now. We rode out to the country road in the last of the light, with the heat still coming up off the black top. We dropped our bikes off at the fence line and walked the rest of the way in. For a year I'd been deciding the woods were only woods. Walking back into them, though, it called my bluff in a hurry. The second those trees closed over the top of us, I felt the old thing come back up the back of my neck. That animal sense of standing somewhere you have no business to be. And I kept it to myself, kept walking. There was just enough light left under the canopy to see by. Nothing moved that wasn't supposed to. We came out into the clearing, and there was the old tower, black against a sky that had not cooled off a single degree, but looking exactly as it always looked, and I took that for a good omen. We did our usual thing, except that night we had brought some hot dogs. Brian had a pack of them and a bag of buns going stale, and some family-sized chips. The plan was to make a little fire at the base and cook before we climbed up, since none of us had eaten supper yet. We never made fires up on the catwalk. Seemed like a bad idea. There was no room and no reason to, anyway. Down at the base in the clearing, it was fine. So Cooch got a small fire going in the ring of rocks that had been there as long as we had, and we roasted hot dogs on sticks, eating them half burnt and talking. And for a while, it was the best night of my summer. Building a fire in a drought was about the only thing dumber than the rest of what we were doing. But it was a little one, and the ground around the ring was bare dirt. Even so, we kept a careful eye on it. When the fire burned down, we kicked dirt over it and climbed up with the cooler. The cooler had Cooch's uncle's beer in it, and the leftover hot dogs and the rest of the chips. Up on the catwalk, the heat was different. Not cooler, but more open, with a little breeze moving up, which we had not been feeling down in the trees. We laid out the bags and sat against the tank. We talked and watched the town. The streetlights were on and half the houses sat dark. You could tell, even from out there, that everyone in town was probably sleeping on top of their covers, trying to sleep. We drank, as Cooch told us, that he had heard the tower could go dry if the drought held, then we'd all be hauling water from the county. And Brian soon brought up Aaron. But for a change, nobody wanted to get into the Aaron stuff tonight. So the talk moved on. I remember thinking I'd been an idiot to be so scared of this place, that I was so glad I came out. It was getting on toward 1 a.m, when the bugs quit. We were up high, away from the trees, so it took me a second to place what had changed. The clearing had gone quiet underneath us. All night there had been the wall of sound coming up out of the woods, the bugs and the frogs from the low spot off past the trees, and it had dropped out, but not everywhere, just down below us, around the base, that same moving pocket of quiet I'd walked through the summer before. My body knew it before my mind did. I sat up, knowing something was wrong, but not sure what it was yet. Brian asked if I was okay. I told him to be quiet. Something in the way I said that shut all 3 of them up. The 4 of us sat there and listened to the woods being silent right under us, but carrying on like normal just a little ways off. I went over to the rail and looked down, and there was nothing to see. Just a clearing, the dirt, and a black ring of trees around it, the path going off into the tract where we had come. The mag light was down in the cooler. I did not get it out. Some part of me did not want to put a light down there, just to find out if I was right. I did not want to be right. Cooch came over and looked too. He said he didn't see anything and wondered what my problem was. I tried to tell them. I said that there was something down there. I said I'd seen it last summer before, that they were wrong, that it wasn't a deer or a hobo, that the story I had told them was the whole and true story. It came out of me in a rush, and it sounded every bit as crazy as I knew it would. And I watched them not believe me. Cooch already grinning, getting ready to give me the business. Cooch grabbed the mag light out of the cooler himself to prove me wrong. He leaned out over the rail with it and swept the light around the clearing. Nothing but dirt and trees and path. I know he was about to say something smart. But then, the beam went across the tree line on the far side, and one of the trunks down there looked wrong. It's hard to explain. It was a trunk, the same color as the others, the same rough bark. But it was a foot or so too wide for the trees around it, and it had no branches, and while the light was on it, it did not move at all. Not a leaf, not a sway. Cooch held the light on it, and we all stared at this trunk. Then, whatever scrap of moon there was went behind something, and the mag light stuttered. Which wasn't paranormal, it was just something it had been doing all night. The batteries must have been worn down, and in the half-second the beam jumped, that trunk disappeared. There was now a gap between two real trees where that trunk had been. Nobody gave me the business after that. Cooch kept the light pointed at the gap, and his hand was far from steady. Brian asked, real quiet, what that was, and I said I didn't know. Denny began to say he wanted to go home over and over, like a kid much younger than he was. I looked down that ladder, the one ladder, running down the leg of the tower into the dark, ending right about where the tree line started, right about where that wrong trunk had been standing. I realized the spot we were in. To get down and out, we had to climb into that clearing and cross it, then go down the path through the trees. We had to go to the ground, and the ground was where it was. The next while was long. The heat did not let up. If anything, it got worse, probably radiating off the steel tank. The water inside that tank, if there was any at this point, was doing nothing to keep the heat at bay. We were all sweating out there, and we had nothing left to drink but warm beer. The worst thing you can put in a body that needs water. We were all getting very, very thirsty. Somewhere in there it came to me, sitting up on that catwalk, parched, with that thing standing guard at the bottom, the only way we could go down. What came to me was exactly how Aaron Pruitt had died. He had not been on anything. He had been right where we were. He'd gone up, then he could not make himself come back down, because coming down meant going to the ground, where it was. So he had stayed up here and waited for it to leave, and it never did. The heat and the thirst, it finished him while he stayed put. The creature, it never had to touch him. It need only wait. It was waiting on us the same way, and it had all the time in the world, and all we had left was a six-pack and the dark. I prayed our bodies would hold, or someone would find us. We didn't talk much. There was nothing to say that helped. Every few minutes one of us would crawl to the rail and look over, to see if it was still there. And it was always still there. A darker patch in the dark at the edge of the clearing, not moving. We would crawl back after seeing it. It had so much patience. It didn't pace back and forth or try to track us. It simply stood there, like it had nothing to do. The town sat out past the trees with all its lights, a couple of miles off, people sleeping in their beds, and it might as well have been on the moon. I kept thinking that if I yelled, really yelled as loud as I could, someone out there might hear me. I knew it was just a child's thought, but I kept thinking about it anyway. Cooch was the first one who broke. I didn't think it would be him, if I had to guess. He was the biggest of us, and the loudest, the last one you would figure to lose his head. But I think that was the trouble. He wasn't built to sit still, or to be afraid. The longer we sat, the worse he got, jiggling his leg, swearing under his breath, and telling us this was all so stupid. We couldn't sit up here all night. The thing was probably gone by now. He hadn't seen it move in 20 minutes, and so on. Before anyone understood what he was doing, he was up and over to the ladder. His foot was on the top rung, and he was starting to go down. I went after him. I had my hands in the back of his shirt, and Brian had him by the arm, and we were both yelling at him to stop, trying to haul him back up without going over the rail ourselves, and Cooch was fighting us. Halfway down the ladder now, his feet feeling for the next rung, his face turned up at us, furious and terrified at the same time. Down below him, at the bottom of the ladder, the darkness moved. We all saw it. The thing came away from the tree line and crossed the clearing toward the foot of the ladder, quickly yet quietly, lining itself up under Cooch, waiting for him to come to it. That's when we got our best look at it. Brian still had the mag light in the hand that wasn't holding on to Cooch, pointing it downward, and for just a moment, it lit up the thing at the bottom of the ladder, close to clear, closer than anybody should have ever seen a thing like that. It was tall. Standing straight, it would have been 1.5 feet over any man I've ever known. And it was thin, horribly sickly thin, like a man made of Play-Doh pulled tight. Its skin, where the light was hitting it, it was bark. I don't mean it was wearing bark, I mean its skin was like the bark of a tree, the same texture, ridged and split and dry, the same as the trunk it had been pretending to be. Like it had been built to stand against a tree and let you walk right past it, never the wiser. It had a head, and I can't tell you one thing about its face. The light was on it for a second, but I've never gotten that second back out of my head. I'm not sure where the strength came from, but we got him. Brian dropped the light and put both hands on Cooch, and we hauled him up that ladder backward, that thing right under his feet. The three of us went down in a pile on the catwalk. Cooch was making a sound I'd never heard a person make before, a high, thin whine, and his pants were wet. He didn't care, and not one of us said a word. The mag light had fallen and lay on the catwalk pointed straight up, throwing a useless beam at the sky. Down below, the thing had stopped at the foot of the ladder. It didn't try to climb it, and I wondered if it even could. It stood at the bottom, its head angled up at us. At least I knew it wasn't going to come up here. No, it just wanted to wait. Sitting there, pulled back from the rail with my heart slamming, I thought of something about the summer before that turned my stomach. All those times in the woods when I'd swung the flashlight around and caught nothing, just trees. That thing had been right there in front of my face, in the light, only feet away, standing by a trunk, being a trunk, while I stared straight at it and never even knew. It had never once lost me out there. It had been that close to me the entire walk out, close enough to put a hand or claw on me, and it let me go. Why? I've never found out why. I'd spent all this time grateful that I got lucky, but I don't think I got lucky. I think we'd been interrupted before it was ready for whatever it does. After the near loss of Cooch, nobody went near the ladder again. We pulled back from the rail and sat against the tank as far from the edge as we could get. The four of us jammed together like little kids, and we waited. My God, I've never been that thirsty in my life. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. Cooch had gone quiet and just shook. Brian kept whispering that somebody would come. His dad would come. Somebody. The rest of us were pessimistic. I believed nobody would. We'd been too careful this time with the cover stories. Not one parent in that town had any idea where we were, and we had made sure of it. This time, no dad with his headlights would come driving up. That thought really hollowed me out up there. The summer before, the thing that pulled me out of those woods was an accident, My dad showing up furious at the worst possible minute and saving my life. There was not going to be an accident like that twice. We were going to sit up on that catwalk until the sun came up, hoping that it would be gone by then. Or would our bodies quit? The same as Aaron. I started trying to figure out how long until the sun came up. It had to be 2, maybe 2:30. The sky off to the east was not doing anything yet. The first light would be hours away, and full sun a while after that. Even then, I didn't know what good it would do us. That thing had come out into the open clearing plain as day to grab at Cooch. Maybe it didn't care about the light at all. Maybe it only cared about the trees. None of us knew. That was part of the torture. Sitting there, splitting the last of the warm beer, being baked alive despite the lack of a sun. Does it eat people? And would it eat human jerky? Because that's what we were slowly becoming. Something came out of the dark then. The dumbest, most ordinary and random thing in the world. We heard them before we saw them. Dogs. The dog pack. The one that had been the talk of the town all summer. The chickens and Petey's leg. They were coming through the tract from the low side. The whole pack of them, crashing through the brush, yipping and baying. The noisiest crap I'd heard all night. They came pouring into the clearing at the base of the tower, with their noses down. I thought about why they were coming our direction, and if I had to guess, to this day I'd tell you the hot dogs. We had cooked meat in that clearing at dusk, and the smell had sat in the dead still air, and the leftovers were still up here in the cooler with us. A pack of half-starved dogs roaming a burnt-up county in the middle of the night. They followed their noses straight to where the food was. Oh, and that thing at the bottom of the ladder. It didn't like those dogs at all. The pack didn't even know it was there. They weren't after it. They came in after the smell of the meat and ran right past where it stood. That tall, bark-covered thing came unstuck from the foot of the ladder and went fast, back into the tree line and away through the woods. 2 or 3 of the dogs caught the movement, and they tore off after it, barking. The rest of them stayed in the clearing under us, nosing the ground, occasionally glancing up at us. For the first time in what had felt like the whole night, the thing was not at the bottom of the ladder. However, we now had a different problem down there, which was almost a dozen feral dogs that had put a kid in stitches that summer. That was a problem that didn't feel Lovecraftian, and it was one we had an answer to. My dad had given me that answer 5 times, remember? You don't run, and you throw him some food. That's when you slowly get away. I told the others the plan. I grabbed the cooler. We went down that ladder fast, faster than was safe. Cooch first, now that he had a reason to move, and the thing was no longer down there. The dogs came at us in the clearing, all teeth and all noise, and I dug carefully while standing on the ladder, the hot dogs and the chips out of that cooler, and I threw all of it as far as I could across the clearing, away from our path. The dogs went for it, every last one of them. A pack of starving dogs will take a fistful of hot dogs over 4 stringy kids every time, and they swarmed that food, so we went the other way. Around the edge of the clearing, onto the path, and we went into the trees. Now we just had to walk that path, the same path, through the trees in the dark, without any light at all. The mag light was still up on the catwalk, pointing at the sky where Brian had dropped it. That was the longest 10 minutes of my life. The 4 of us holding on to the backs of each other's shirt in a line. We moved as fast as we could without breaking into a run, listening for any sign of it, and listening for those dogs. Every outline of a trunk we could even make out could be the thing that might come unstuck and step out towards us. But it had gone the other way, right? Off after whatever the dogs had chased it into. Or it had simply gone. It had left us alone. We came out at the fence line, and we got on our bikes. We rode back into town standing on those pedals the whole way. We were pedaling too hard and too fast to speak. We only slowed down when we were under the streetlights. We never told anyone the story, because for one, if our parents found out we went back to the watchtower, well, we'd be in a lot of trouble. Again. Plus, there's no way to tell a story like this without people thinking you're a bit loopy. If someone heard it, the whole thing, they would immediately assume we drank too much, got too hot, then got scared in a very weird way by a pack of wild dogs. And we didn't even have any proof. I mean, we had Cooch's wet pants, but for the sake of his honor, we kept that to ourselves too. The four of us were never quite the same after that night. We stayed friends, of course. It's not one of those friendship-ruining experiences. But we did stop going out to the tower, and we never went back to the tract, neither as a group nor as individuals. And the story about Aaron, the legends and all the rumors and the theories, those were finally laid to rest. You should know that the summer Aaron Pruitt died, it was the last real drought the town had before the one we experienced. The hottest, driest one anyone could remember, right up until ours came along and beat it. I didn't put two and two together until I was a grown man, reading about old droughts in some history book, and when I made the realization, I sat straight up in my chair. I don't know what that thing is. I don't know where it goes in the wet years and the cold ones, but I would hazard a guess. It comes back when the creek runs low, when the corn curls up, and the heat won't quit. I've wondered ever since how many dry summers that little town has buried a kid and blamed it on something else entirely. I've heard of monsters that come in the rain, the fog, blizzards, hurricanes, and even tornadoes. Y'all remember the tornado wolves, right? But I swear, this might be the first time I've heard of a creature who awakens in a drought. So that's creepy. And now me being thirsty after a long recording session is a little creepier than it should be. Good night, and go drink some water. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. If you have an experience with the unexplained, I would love to hear it. Send it to me over at darkstories.org so I can narrate it on the show in the future. Support us and help us become a bit more independent by going to erie.fm/premium and signing up for premium membership. You'll get ad-free access to these episodes, bonus stories, audiobooks, and more. That's erie.fm/premium. Thank you. Till next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.